Hello again. Welcome to another Energon Universe discussion video. This time, we're taking a look at Void Rivals number 3, published August 16th, 2023. Previously, in issue number 2, Darak and Solila managed to escape the planetoid they were marooned on, only to be snatched up by the Skuxxoid, who promptly demanded their surrender. Issue number 3 picks up immediately where the previous issue left off, with Solila and Darak rejecting the call for surrender and attacking the Skuxxoid. In the ensuing altercation, it becomes clear that Solila is more than just a pilot, as she is in possession of a weapon reserved for Zertonian warriors, a fancy spear that's capable of being summoned back to her grasp. The duo manage to hold their own and make their retreat deeper into the Rockoroid, and the Skuxxoid lets them go, ominously foreshadowing that there are more dangerous beings aboard than him. Darak and Solila attempt to sneak through the Rockoroid, but it becomes clear, thanks to Darak's android's detection systems, that the Skuxxoid is observing them through the ship's surveillance systems. He then opens a holding cell door, releasing a giant mechanical scorpion that was trapped inside. Darak and Solila pull it together once again to coordinate a counter-offensive against the scorpion using their respective skill sets, forcing the beast back into its cell. Then a voice calls out from the next cell down, proposing an alliance of mutual aid. Thinking their situation couldn't get any worse, Darak opens the cell, revealing an unnamed Quintesson, who leads the Agorian and Zertonian through the corridors of the Rockoroid towards his ship. And just as the trio reach the Quintesson starship, the Skuxxoid reappears to reclaim his Quintesson prisoner and barter with Darak and Solila. Having run a search through his databases and finding no records of bounties placed upon the Agorian or Zertonian, the Skuxxoid has no reason to detain our protagonists and offers them a trade. The makeshift rocket that Darak and Solila used to escape the planetoid is made of a valuable alloy, and in exchange for the ramshackle craft, the Skuxxoid offers a functional Nebulan ship along with some food. Much to the dismay of the Quintesson, the pair take the deal and depart back home towards the Sacred Ring. Later, as they close in on their destination, the two formulate a plan so as not to be seen together, with each taking an escape pod to their respective territories and then finding high-ranking allies they can trust with the secret history of the Sacred Ring that they learned through Darak's vision. As Darak says his goodbyes to Solila, the Zertonian suddenly attacks him, rendering the Agorian unconscious, presumably betraying him, but to what end remains unclear. And that surprising cliffhanger is where the third chapter of Void Rivals comes to a close. And there's a decent amount to talk about with this one. It should come as no surprise that the artwork remains excellent in issue 3. This chapter of Void Rivals moves at a fairly quick pace with a sizable portion of action, probably the most action we've seen in the title so far, which mixes things up in a nice way and allows Lorenzo de Felici to flex his dynamic fight scene chops. I like the way de Felici uses motion lines to highlight the intensity of an action or movement. We saw this in the first issue, but it returns to great effect here. His line work seems to me to become looser and more wild, crazed during action sequences, heightening the frantic pace of what's happening in the panels. These moments really emphasize the cartoon-like quality in De Felici's style. And I think this panel where Solila punches the wall is a good example. The line work on her arm here forgoes realism to convey the intensity of the action, the lines themselves becoming an extension of Solila's rage and frustration at failing in her original mission. I like the way moments like these contrast with some of the less abstracted panels. I specifically mean these shots of Skuxxoid set against a stark black background, which of course is brought home by Lopes' color work. The visual identity of this book just continues to be really strong and compelling and fun to read, and I think by the time we reach the conclusion of De Felici's tenure on the series, there's going to be a great showcase within these pages of the total range of his abilities. And there are a number of Transformers nods in this issue, which gives the impression that Kirkman is gradually pulling Void Rivals deeper and deeper into the shared universe by giving us more and more references and callbacks. Most of these take the form of name drops, but some take on an actual presence in the story, like the Quintesson and his characteristic corkscrew ship. This type of Quintesson with the xenomorph-esque head in particular is referred to as a prosecutor, due in no small part to that being his role in the '86 animated movie, where his prosecuting pretty much only entailed encouraging his prisoners to beg for their lives and asking the five-faced Quintesson judge to deliver deliver a verdict. Another reference is the ship that Skuxxoid offers for trade to Darak and Solila. He mentions it's Nebulan, pre-Hive. This effectively introduces Nebulos into the Energon universe and simultaneously roots it firmly in the G1 cartoon era with a nod to the Hive, a group of despotic Nebulans led by Zarek, who ruled over the planet before affiliating themselves with the Decepticons. And there was definitely a point where I was considering whether or not the Agorians and Zertonians might end up playing the role of the Nebulans from the original fiction, meaning they would potentially become headmasters, target masters, and power masters. And while that outcome is not necessarily impossible, it seems less likely to me now that the Nebulans have been referenced. And all that is, of course, assuming Skybound seriously delves into that era of Generation 1 beyond a name drop. The Skuxxoid also mentions Slizardo, another alien who popped up in a couple of episodes, the Gambler, and Grimlock's New Brain. The references continue with the Quintesson mentioning the Age of Wrath, which I really only know about based off of the unfinished War Within series from Dreamwave. I know the gist of it beyond that it's an aligned continuity thing with the Quintessons conquering Cybertron, but I just don't know a lot of specifics about the aligned continuity in general. I have one of the novels, Exodus, I think, but I still haven't gotten around to reading it. Hopefully I will someday, but I think that's about it for the Transformers references in this issue. Maybe. The last thing I want to mention is the mechanical scorpion. And I've got to be honest, if this is a direct reference to something, I'm at a complete loss. I know Chumley had a robotic scorpion in Prime Target, but I don't really think that's what's going on here, and I don't think this is Scorponok from any iteration that I know of, just based on the fact that it doesn't seem to transform or possess any kind of sentience. If I'm missing something and any of you have any idea what this is, I'd love to hear it because I'm stumped. I'm thinking this isn't a reference to anything and is just kind of like the mechanical squid on the Quintesson homeworld, just a crazy detail thrown in for fun. This issue also contains a preview for Transformers #1, which I'm going to touch on briefly. So if you want to go in totally blind for Transformers #1, you might want to skip past this part. There's nothing that crazy in here in terms of spoilers or revelations, but just figured I'd give you a heads up. I'll put a time code down below to help you avoid what little spoilers there are. Anyway, turning to the preview inside Void Rivals #3, this is where we learn that the kid with the vest that we've seen previously is named Spike, or at least I learned that for the first time. I'm not sure if this info had already been out there or not, or if it was something that was in the Transformers #1 ashcan from San Diego Comic-Con. I don't know. But this was news to me when I read it. And obviously, Spike is the name of the main human character from the G1 cartoon. So once again, Skybound is going back to the G1 cartoon well, at least as far as the names of their human characters. I was under the impression that the kid might be a whole new character, but that's fine. The girl he's with here isn't named in the preview, but I'm wondering if she's Carly, Spike's love interest and eventual wife in the G1 cartoon continuity, or maybe she's a whole new character. As with many things, we'll just have to wait and see. The thrust of the preview is Spike and his companion finding themselves inside the crashed Ark, with the Autobots and Decepticons still deactivated and strewn about the ship, just like you remember from More Than Meets the Eye Part 1. There's also this screen or bay door or whatever, and what looks to be Jetfire in alt mode flying towards the Ark. This teaser and the letter pages make it seem extremely likely that we'll see Jetfire again in issue #1 of the Transformers, which is frankly sooner than I expected to see him again, but I'm happy to be wrong on that one, as I'm always happy to see the big lug pop up in the fiction. Fingers crossed he has a prominent part. So yeah, there's not a whole lot to this preview, but there is some lovely, extremely detailed artwork from Daniel Warren Johnson. And if this is a taste of things to come, then this is gonna be a great looking book. All the greebles and junk on the arc thrusters alone are put together so well, and they're just one part of a beautifully composed page. This page is a perfect example of the exact sort of thing I was most excited for when I saw the news that Daniel Warren Johnson would be on the Transformers. Man, I am ready for this book. I can't wait to see the whole thing. Whatever happens with the story, I think the art is going to be fantastic. But to wrap this up, Void Rivals continues to hold my interest. I'm definitely growing more invested as this story moves along, and it's at the point where I'm caring less about the potential tie-ins or nods leads to Transformers, and mainly want to see what's going to happen to Darak and Solila. Which is not to say I don't want to see how Void Rivals will be interacting with the rest of the Energon universe, because I definitely do. After these first 3 issues, I was a little concerned about the Transformers side of this turning into a revolving door of references with little to no development, but taking a little bit of time to think it over, this approach works for where we're at with the Energon universe currently. As a gradual introduction into a bigger shared universe, these nods help to build excitement for what's to come. And to Kirkman's credit, he's using these references well, having them always feed directly into the immediate scenario, even if they may not factor into the story in a long-term way. Now, eventually, I'm hoping to see Skybound flesh out this universe and put their own spin on it in a way that really distinguishes it from the G1 material they're referencing. But for now, I think the approach they're using works fine. I'm curious to see what's motivating Solila's apparent betrayal, and whether it's just a straightforward selling out Darak to maintain her position, or if she's been running a long con for a while, possibly even from the start, or if she's playing some 4D chess with some sort of crazy endgame in mind. I feel like Kirkman planted little seeds throughout these 3 issues that you could interpret to make sense with the first 2 possibilities at least. Like, if Solila's such a badass warrior, how did Darak overpower her, and why did she beg for mercy? Does that seem suspicious to anyone else? Could the comet have been a ruse to lure out the son of a prominent political leader? Or did those puzzle pieces fall into place later, after Solila got to know Darak? Or none of the above? Whatever the case, I'm looking forward to seeing how it pans out. And this video means I'm all caught up on Void Rivals, so from here on out, these discussion videos will come out monthly with the release of the comics. So that means we likely won't talk about Void Rivals again until near the end of September. Join me then to find out how wrong I was about probably everything. I'm still waiting for that Solila backstory issue I predicted after all. Maybe next time, right? I'm giving it one more before I give up on that. Anyway, that's it from me. Thanks for watching, and take care.